Hello, Stephen here with Alaskan Octopodian, and in this video I document a recent hike to the summit of Bird Ridge. Bird Ridge is part of the Chugach Mountains and sits along the coast of the Turnagain Arm, about 26 miles south of Anchorage along the Seward Highway. The drive alone is worth the trip. Much of the highway parallels the Alaska Railroad, with the Chugach Mountains rising sharply to the east and sweeping views across the inlet towards the mountains of the Kenai Peninsula. On clear days, it feels less like a highway and more like a moving postcard. The trailhead is clearly marked, with parking available both before and after the start of the trail. While Bird Ridge is only about 2.4 miles to the summit ridge, the hike is considered difficult by most trail guides. The reason becomes obvious very quickly. Instead of using switchbacks to gradually gain elevation, the trail largely follows the fall line straight up the mountain. That means roughly 3,350 feet of elevation gain in just 2.4 miles, nearly 1,400 feet a mile. And because the beginning of the trail is relatively gentle, much of that climbing is concentrated into the upper half of the hike. Most hikers allow about 5 to 5.5 hours for the round trip. I'd consider myself in reasonably good cardiovascular shape, and even moving at a steady pace, the hike still took just over 4.5 hours to complete. The trail begins with a short, paved section before transitioning into a wide, gradual ascent through dense forest. After the first few tenths of a mile, the trail begins to steepen, though it remains pleasant beneath the pine canopy. We chose to hike Bird Ridge in mid-May, hoping that several days of warm weather had cleared much of the lower snowpack from the mountain. As the elevation increases, the trees begin to thin and the terrain becomes rockier and far steeper. The trail narrows in places and the climb becomes more rugged and relentless. But it is also here that we get our first real glimpses over the Turnagain Arm. Around 1.8 miles into the ascent, after gaining roughly 2,300 feet of elevation, we began encountering significant snowpack. Even in late spring, winter still held a firm grip on the upper mountain. As we continued upward, the weather also began to deteriorate. From the southeast, we could see snow and fog beginning to move into the surrounding peaks. But with the worsening weather came increasingly dramatic views over the Turnagain Arm. The higher we climbed, the more commanding the landscape became. By the time we reached the summit ridge, the wind was blowing hard and visibility was beginning to collapse. The final stretch of the route was guarded by large overhanging cornices that looked increasingly unstable in the worsening conditions. Because of this, we decided not to attempt the final few hundred feet. Instead, we stopped long enough for a quick panoramic shot, an uncomfortable mountaintop selfie, and a brief moment to appreciate just how quickly conditions can change in the mountains of Alaska. The descent went fairly quickly, though a steep grade turned much of it into a workout for the quads. Bird Ridge has a reputation for being unforgiving on the way down, and by the end of the hike, it was easy to understand why. Despite the weather, this was an incredibly scenic and rewarding hike. And while the mountain may have won the final few hundred feet that day, both the dogs and I were happy to make it back to the car safely, with enough time to celebrate the adventure with food and refreshments at nearby Girdwood Brewing Company.